remembered to record. This time I actually remembered. Okay. So we're now being recorded. So
I just very quickly want to say hi to everyone. I've been more of the silent partner in the Miyako Michael team. Miyako has taken the lead. She is not able to be with us this afternoon, so I'm kind of sitting in for her and taking notes and reporting back to her.
I don't know, you haven't been so silent. You've been here almost every meeting.
Well, I think more recently I have been in awe of the core group that really stuck with the details. I'm not a detail person. I'm sort of a big picture guy. And I always appreciate the scrutinizers who have the patience to go into the fine detail.
Well, I remember when Michael and I asked Michael to write an article with me, the one I wrote about making order out of chaos. And he said, oh, let's just write this general thing. I'm going, no, we've got to go into the details. I said, no, let's stay with the general stuff. And I go, no, we've got to go into the details. So, but I did reference you in that. I did say that we worked on it together at the beginning. So
I think it takes everybody's skill. I think it takes the big picture people, the scrutinizers, and I think together good stuff comes out.
It takes the people who work. I've seen research that it takes the people who know how to think super logically and go straight for it, and on any good decision committee. And you also need the people who are associative but can't really get to any conclusions. If you put them together, then you get the best decisions. There's actually research on that. So there you go. Starts going. I'm getting food for my dog because she's driving me crazy.
So hello everyone. Oops, I just lost it. I lost everyone. Okay, there we are. So well, thanks for coming too. I'm sorry that I popped in a little bit late. It's my shelter day, and you know, no wolves today, but yay. So we can just go through. I sent over like where we are on the paper, and appreciate everyone's efforts and comments and participation. And I think we're almost there.
You've done amazing work. You really have.
Oh, it takes a village, just like Michael said. It's all the different personalities and people with different skill sets, and you know, one person can't do it. Well, at least I can't. So I'm very grateful.
You and Daniela are a team. What can I say?
Yeah, and Mariana, thank you for signing up to do the one section, the what we're not doing. So we appreciate that. And then let me just double check to see if anybody. I just want to see.
There's says somebody in the waiting room, but it doesn't show where I can admit them.
Okay, so Laura, you've already been working with Mariana. Okay, so it's Laura and Mariana working together. Okay, so that's the part, and then we're just a few. We have the link to the current graphic that will be included in there, the link to Daniela's rubric, and if there's a way that you think that it makes sense to put it into one document, like digitally, it's kind of easy because you can just link around. But if it's something that's going to be printed, it's a little less. Hi, Laura.
Hi.
It's a little less. So if anyone has any ideas how to, like, I was trying to think of how to even take Daniela's rubric and use, like, can I make it an image, but it's too big for that. So any ideas you have, you know, as far as how we can do that. And then finally, just the link of the paper. So if anybody's interested in kind of going through, and I mean, it needs a little tweaking, a lot of tweaking. And I think we still need, well, whatever, we need a lot. So I just want to open the floor to anybody with comments or thoughts or things that we're missing, things that you have ideas about.
I always feel like the odd one here. But I guess it was very helpful to look at your references in the paper. And at this point, I'm just asking again what our role is. Do we want to actually come up with definitions for all the types of animal assisted work that we have discussed and that I try to summarize in that enormous table for us, not necessarily for a paper? Because if we want to do that, then there's got to be like the body of the paper with the definitions, the narrative of what's AAT, what's AAA, what are the subdomains of each, and how do we define them. And I felt, so I looked at some of the articles that you referenced. Some I had seen in the past, some I have not. And I got this feeling that we've been running in circles and this has been done and done and done over and over and over again. So maybe what we should do or should have done would have been to decide which are the important organizations that have something to say, look at their white papers and make a table of all those definitions and see
we did
what's
that.
common. Well,
did that,
I saw that, but they're just sort of marked some of the elements, but not the definitions themselves. So what is common? So in a principled way, what do we want to include in the definitions that would be consistent across all the definitions that we're doing? Because I don't think we need to talk about credentials in the definitions unless it's absolutely necessary. So do we have a principled way to structure these definitions? To my mind, if we had, so Yahaya white paper, these are very important. AAII, it looks like the AAII, the Animal Assisted Interventions International, kind of advertise themselves as the major organization that does credentialing. Is that something recognized in the field? Is that the organization that's the top one for credentialing everything that involves animal assisted work or not? So that's where I'm not.
Yeah, sorry, they're not the only one, like, but they are.
Which are the ones that matter? So to my mind, if we know which ones are the ones that really matter and just put their definitions one next to each other for each of these terms, it might be easier to come up with something that basically includes the critical elements that all these other organizations have talked about. Because I was looking at the Animal Assisted Interventions International website, and there's a video, and I don't know who Jennifer Rogers is, and I was hoping she would be part of this nomenclature team, but apparently she's not. But she was explaining a process that looks incredibly similar to what we've been doing since February, and came up with pretty much the same type of groupings for that third category that we're calling animal assisted support services, and they're calling specialty services. But they still call what we call visitation, they still call activities, which is very confusing. And the only difference is they want to include the placement services like training dogs in this animal assisted specialty, and we wanted to take that out. But other than that, everything is very similar, and they have all these booklets with all the definitions and so on. So to what extent do we want to do all this in parallel to what everybody else is doing? Or what entitles this group to be sort of the one that comes up with the definitions for the field? Do you know what I mean? It's just...
Okay, can I explain? I'll explain it. This was what I started out with on the first day. We were looking at, working with AAII and Ohio. So we worked on putting this together. And then we said the same thing that you just said. We said, well, who are we to make this decision? Let's open it up to a global community. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't just putting forth what we thought. We looked at 6 different international organizations that had definitions of AAI or any of the terms, you know, that what were the credentials, what were the criteria, and we put it in that table so we could identify a way to recommend terminology. And we wrote a paper, which is in there, and we submitted it to the Ohio Journal. And then that's when we were like, maybe we shouldn't just do this. We want to get global acceptance. And the only way to have global acceptance is to have other people on board and not just say, here's what we want to do. So we opened it up to, you know, the 100 people who signed on. Not everybody stayed on, but we wanted to make sure, like, are we on the right path? Are we doing this? Is this in agreement? Instead of putting into people's faces, this is what we're going to do, versus we want what makes sense to you, and then getting that kind of an input, and then we can make recommendations from there. So that's what we're trying to do. This is kind of like a recommendations paper based on, and we can write it into the paper that we looked at all of this, and that's part of that whole process. So
Right. So I'm wondering if it would be good to have a big part of this paper, our sort of analysis of what has been proposed up to this point, and just have a summary of what has been proposed by who, but who is important in the field. So that's what I'm not, obviously Ohio, ISAS, there's a paper from the people in England, Carullo and others, on terminology and standards that I thought was excellent. So if we could just justify another set of recommendations by first going over what has already been proposed by others, because it looks like this AAI is going ahead with credentialing, is going ahead with everything as if they are it for the entire field. They have their booklets, they have all of that. And I'm not sure if they are it or not. Pet Partners also has a set of terminology and all that. So you guys are in the practice field, so you know who to look up to as these are indeed valid organizations. Can we review what they have proposed, and this is what we want to propose as different from that, or not different? And that's why I made that whole
it doesn't have to be different,
table.
yeah.
Or the same, but right. So I don't know if that's useful, but if we just come up with our set of proposals and so on, the reviewers would say, well, yeah, there are already white papers out there and other documents. Sorry.
No, Daniela, this is Michael. You know, the only thing I can say, you know, this is such a circular process.
Exactly.
Definitely. And I really feel Amy and Nancy and all of us have really tried to do it right. Now, despite that, don't forget, there is competition in this field, and there are certain organizations that will reject what a group consensus comes up with. And that's, you know, and you also didn't mention the equine groups, which of course are out there too, which have their own terminologies. And I think we've been extremely sensitive to that and the process that they have gone through. You know, I think as long as we reflect that this is not a rigid thing, that this is not something we're shoving down people's throats, and also that it's an evolving process. This is the terminology at this time, our best effort, trying to consider all the different angles. And it will change again in 5 years.
I say it spirals. It spirals. It keeps going around circles, but it is getting better. And I'm wondering about the word credentialing. I'm not really very knowledgeable, almost not knowledgeable at all about AAI, to tell you the truth. I've never been involved with their group, but why is it credentials? I mean, they are.
I don't know, they're an international organization. They seem to be very well organized.
No, but are they allowed to credential?
It's not
therapists. I mean, that's just a word.
Nope,
I'm not sure.
Nope. They're not. What they're just trying to do is, you know, again,
there's standards for credentialing. That's there's a difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all they're trying to do. So it gives you people an opportunity to like because it's a very extensive process to be credentialed. So you have to, it's like 2 binders full of stuff. Like here's the training that I have, the education that I have, my animal behavior experience, here's what I'm doing, and you put it all together, and then it goes through their process. And it's just it's an effort to keep people to raise the bar, raise the standard of the practice. So they're not saying you have to do it. Like here in the States, we have the Council for professional dog trainers, right? So anybody can be a dog trainer. My neighbor can, and it does happen. Oh, I have a dog. Oh, I did a good job with my dog. I'm going to be a dog trainer now, right? There's nobody that says, you know, that you need any kind of credential, but there is the CPDT that says, hey, we have this exam, we have this process for you. And if you pass this exam, you get these credentials. And it just says to people on the outside that you've done above and beyond. You have some form of education, knowledge about behavior, knowledge about training, you're training in this way. So it makes you more credible. And that's what AAII is doing. They're not saying you have to, they're saying that, hey, we're offering this as an opportunity for you to show others that you have an elevated standard of practice, if that makes sense. So yeah, so definitely all of this stuff is good stuff to include in the paper, like how we got here, why we got here, why this group. And we're supposed to, I think it's next Friday, I'm meeting with IHIO and AAII about this topic in general for their conference, and just talking through this with their members and with the recommendation. So ideally, if we have at least a good draft of the paper, it'll be a solid foundation for that discussion and presentation that will follow. And who knows, we could go through all this, and you're right, when Michael said the competition, oh, it depends who the reviewer is, right? If you're submitting it and it has happened, and it's happened where the reviewer says, you know, oh, I don't believe in that because Pet Partners now has they're doing it, so we'll just cancel this one and we'll just move over in this way. And it does happen. What do? You just keep pushing and trying other journals, and
they're done that.
Right, exactly. But which is why it's nice to say that we have this group of, whatever was 20 at one time who was very involved, but going through and getting that and saying, like, we have people from all over the world who have all agreed. We all agree on this, and we're not identifying animal assisted occupational therapy, and like, we're not doing that stuff. We're just saying, what are the categories, and what is a solid definition? What's enough of a quality definition? And a lot of it is already done out there. The pieces that we found were missing was some of the definitions didn't mention animal welfare, which that one's a big sensitivity to me, for me. And then as far as like what a professional was, like, oh yeah, I've been doing this, for 14 years. So yeah, I'm professional. Okay, but the professional, does it mean that I have knowledge in AAI, or is it my professional credential or licensure, right? So those are some of the things that.
So it looked to me like there's a direct mapping of some of our terms to, for instance, the AAII, but instead of interventions, we use services, and we have a lot of reasons to use services. And maybe that should be somehow justified in our paper, because interventions is a very problematic word, even though everybody else uses it. So maybe that's a missing point that should be in the introduction or somewhere there. And after that, it looked to me like AAT and AAE, those two are pretty much identical in their view and our view and Yahio's view. And the only major issue there is that the processes have to be led by a professional in health, mental health, or education. No matter who owns the animal, whether they work collaboratively or not, there has to be a leader of the process of the treatment that is a licensed professional. So there's got to be a protocol, a treatment plan, or a lesson education plan. And if that is very clear, then these two huge, big areas we're done with, and we're mapping it exactly with what AAI wants, and Yahio says the same thing. So that leaves us with the murky part, the big, big part that was in the past called AAA, and we had a lot of problems with that. And we came to this conclusion that it basically entails two types of activities: the visitation, which is a huge, huge, huge part of it, and the more specialized activities that we've listed in our column. And that's exactly what AAI came up with, but they call the more specialized ones specialty
Special
programs.
programs. Yep.
Yeah, and then they also add what we wanted to exclude, the placement programs, the training of the animals for placement, which they do consider part of these support services, but we don't. So anyway, but the problem is that they still use activity for visitation. So if we could just communicate with them and say, would you accept the term visitation instead? It looks like we would map very much with this major organization and very much with the Ohio white papers. Now, I don't know about other major papers or what else we need to refer to specifically, but it looks to me like there's a lot of cleanup that's been done if we agree on these aspects. But then how do you want to structure the definition part of our paper? Term by term, domain by domain? Do we need to just say the umbrella term is animal assisted services and this is why we don't use intervention, but we use services, why we think services covers everything that involves animals in these roles and so on. And then these are the major subdomains, and there are only 3 of them: treatment, education, and support services. And then within that, should we define every single one? Animal assisted psychotherapy, animal assisted education, occupational therapy, animal assisted. Do we need to do that? No, just, okay. Okay, then I agree. It's not that much. But then the third column, the one that's referring to the animal assisted support programs, that probably needs a little more narrative explanation because we came up with this new division.
Right. Yes. Exactly.
Amy, are there actually members of AAII and AAHO in this group? I thought there was, right?
Right. Well,
I mean,
I'm representing AAII in here.
Okay. Okay.
And then Marie Jose Ohio, she's doing the therapy animal terms, and Joanne from Ohio, she's doing the government regulations, and Melissa,
right,
the president of AAII, she's doing the continuing education and education piece.
Right.
And I'm really wondering, with Daniela, your rubric, like how much of it might fit more in the education and continuing education part. Like I see that there's an overlap, like here's the definitions and the criteria, but I see yours a lot in that group as far as like what would the credentialing look like. And
oh, definitely. No, so this was not necessarily a table that I made for our proposed
I love
paper, but
I want it
for us to figure out what elements we need to take into account to understand the differences between these terms, because what do they refer to? So yeah, I think we probably should leave out the credentials, human credentials, even the animal credentials or whatever from the actual paper. Yeah.
Well, I like it, and I would love to see it in there, but like even as we talk and as we were going through it, I'm like, oh, I think it just really fits with Melissa's group.
Right.
Well, I have a question about that. Just the question, are they totally in parallel with us in the way our thinking, for instance, the role of the animal, the type of training. I mean, because this, for instance, I can say that, that the role of the animal, the type of training an animal in psychotherapy is going to be majorly different than in another type of therapy, or in education, or in the service programs. And I would want somebody to, who's in that field, to be the one to write that down, and it'd be part of the definitions.
Yeah,
so I really liked it when I saw that in Daniela's thing. I said, "Yay, this is great."
Yeah.
So that's why, for instance, for psychotherapy, I said that depending on the theoretical perspective, the animal role would differ. So we can't come
Right,
up
so the
with.
question is if the other group is doing that, or it's still part of what we're doing.
Oh,
Yeah,
That's my
it will overlap. I think that addressing it and noting it, and Melissa, she reads ours, like everything that's in our folder, she reads, she watches our video. So she's very much in lockstep with where we're headed.
And again, I think we're also getting into certain points still, because we're looking at this, between us. I just looked up, for instance, I remember something that really bothered me in the AAI white paper, and, to say, oh, we're just, very similar to them. They actually meant that educational professionals can do therapy. I mean, it's actually listed in there. It says, AAT is delivered and or directed by formally trained, oh, wait a second. Oh, wait, no, wait a second. Okay, directed and delivered by health, education, or human service professionals. And I was trying to tell them, why educational professionals in there? Why is that word even?
I think they were talking about faculty, like maybe they were referencing like university faculty in that case.
It's so confusing if they're saying by educational professions they're doing therapy. It's like,
yeah, I guess that's what Amy says, education and human services profession. Education shouldn't be there.
Yeah,
the
it adds to the confusion. No. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
And we can note that. It's another thing we could just.
I think where ours is much, it's a little bit more exact.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm sure there are different places. Again, I feel badly that I haven't really taken a good look. I took a look at the AAI like I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, and I haven't really gone into their site since.
Yeah,
so,
and they've changed a lot of things in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But I think all of this stuff is really great. And if you want to, and I believe me, I have no problem, go into the document, write things in there. Like if you're like, no, this really needs to be in there, just put it in a different color so we know that it's new, but add it by all means. And I feel like once it's all done, then we can kind of all go through it as, what needs to stay, what needs to go. Did we not include enough here? Does this need to be expanded on? But yeah, I mean, there's no like ownership in this document. It's an our document. So
our doc, yeah, and I like it so far. I like where it's going.
Yeah. So we're there, but like I said, I think a lot of the stuff that you bring up, Daniela and Laura, and is needed. It needs to be spelled out. And I'm like Michael, I have a harder time getting in the deeper details. So if somebody else with the deeper detail mind wants to take that on, by all means.
I was just wondering if we want to sort of put up front why we wanted to depart a little bit from the traditional divisions that seem to be common across organizations and paper, which is naming the overall field as animal assisted interventions, why that's problematic. So that's sort of the first point, introducing services instead of interventions for the clear reasons that intervention means something different to the public and something different in the scientific field. And then the second major point of difference from the traditional divisions is animal assisted activities. We chose to replace the word activities with support services because, again, the word activities is so problematic, and this this domain covers a variety of practices that we thought need to be divided by whatever we thought more specialized, or visitation and more specialized. So I think if we put that out at the beginning somehow, then we could proceed with definitions and so on, because the rest is not all that different from what the other definitions are. If people know that AAA now is called AASP and so on.
Mhm. Yeah, we could write it up however. Like, this is not meant to be like, hey, look at us, we're different. Like, I think it's perfectly fine to say like what other people have is fine.
I thought Nancy did a great job
Mhm.
just recently was trying to introduce the idea of animal assisted services up front, because once we say up front what we really were disagreeing with in terms of these terms that are so ambiguous, everything else sort of falls into place a little easier.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I like the transparency of it.
Does anyone know if Meg isn't here? Did we hear from Meg?
I haven't heard from her.
Yeah, sort of surprising.
Is there a time difference that doesn't work for her? Because it's
It's
really
early in the
hard with
morning.
Australia. Okay.
I'll give her a call, see if
Yeah.
she answers.
I still have a question about the ownership of this document. We were
Mhm.
speaking about all the organizations that are involved, and AAII, IAHIO, ISET. How are we going to present this document? Who are we telling other people that we are? Who are we?
Well, initially we're like it's called the International Consortium of AAI, which will be changed obviously if it goes through, but that's how we're doing it now. And then once we share it with ISAT, so ISAT, some of the other organizations, if
Hey, this is Nancy.
they'll review it, we'll get their buy-in, and then it can be a broader document. It'll be again a more of a global. It won't just be ours. It will be everyone's. That's
Okay.
our hope for it.
Yeah, so this means that we are creating a basic document that will be considered by other organizations, and
Mhm.
they will add comments and maybe
Mhm.
change definitions. Is that possible?
Yeah, or if they could make their own suggestions, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And are we going to present it as a white paper from IAHIO, or?
Initially, like that's like in September is their conference, and they want to have at least something like, here's where we are, here's what we would like to recommend. We already did it last year where how we met most of you, like we got some input, based on the half day workshop that we did last year with it. So we'd like to have the actual recommendations instead of opening it up for more. We would like it to be, here's what we have, or at least here is the process, here's where we are in the process, and talking about why these new, or I don't want to call them new, why these modified terms are relevant.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else have anything?
No, just very quickly on the circular thing. I think we do need to be careful once we present it and invite feedback. That can very easily lead right back into conversations that we had to end up where we are and go back on something, and it
Right.
can be never ending. So I think we do need to have some kind of an endpoint, precisely because there was so much input from so many.
Mm-hmm.
At least an
Agreed.
endpoint for a moment,
Yeah, I think if the way that we have been looking at it is if we get majority, right? Like there's always going to be somebody out there who doesn't like, I don't like it at all. It happens all the time. There's people who, Risa Van Fleet's been doing animal assisted play therapy forever, but there's people who still try to act like they're the ones who established animal assisted play therapy, right? Like there's egos always get involved, and some people don't want to buy in because I want to have my own. We can't stop that, right? People can do that, but our goal was we just want, if we get a large majority of people who are all on the same page, it just makes us stronger, and it gives us that opportunity for that uniform. There will be people who will not stray from animal assisted activity. They may not stray from therapy animal. They may not. We're not the police, right? But if we say like, hey, this, and I would love to be able to include, I know we have all the names of everyone, but like, again, where we're from and all over the world and all the representation of all the different organizations. And I think it's really impressive. I think, everybody here comes from a really solid background, and I think it's impressive for what that's worth. And Laura, I think you had something else too. Yep, you're muted though.
Okay. So Mariana and I have been working on the human-animal bond and human-animal interactions that are not going to be defined, but by not defining them, I'm kind of struggling because I think we both are. What we're trying to do is describe them and to include characteristics and criteria and offer examples and some scientific references to those terms. And kind of what we've come up with so far that we wanted to share is we've kind of teased out human-animal bond and human-animal interactions to really be, they are distinctly different. And what we've kind of established is that the human-animal bond piece of it is that kind of relational connection, that it's that emotional connection between the human and the animal that influences one and the other on that relational or emotional piece, and that the human-animal interactions are, by definition of interactions, that they are actionable, that they are actions that influence the other party's actions. So there's that dyadic action, physical component versus the emotional component. And I think we were just kind of wondering if that's on track, if we are good continuing to pursue kind of that clarity or that separation. So the human-animal bond being the relational connection, the emotional influences, where the interactions are the actional or actual behavioral pieces of that. And Mariana, help me out here as far as
yes, we have the problem that
sense.
yes, we try to not define, but we must review the define that others did it of these terms. So we talked a lot with Laura, and we found some definitions of bond and interaction. For instance, in bond term involve both a regulation of two, a human and the animal. And also we look at the last AAI conference, the theories of enactivism, biophilia, and all that things that make sense of the change of one in the presence of the other, the human and the animal. And we decided that when we talk about human-animal interaction, perhaps it's more like when you could see the birds flying in the sky, or here in my country, when you go to see the whales at the sea, but you don't have a really bond with that animal.
Exactly.
I don't. We want to share with all of you, if you agree with these ideas we have.
Because what we found is that sometimes when they're talking about the human-animal bond, they actually use the word interaction to define it. And sometimes when they're talking about
Yeah.
interactions, they use the word
Mhm.
bond to define it. So by kind of teasing that apart, I guess that's what we did, is kind of put the more, the more effectual, emotional piece as the bond, and the actual interactions, because an interaction is defined as an action, that those are the more actional or behavioral
Mhm.
pieces of it.
Because the bond is a
That makes-
relationship.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Michael, Michael.
And then,
Sorry.
Yeah, I so agree with you. And Laura, this is so important. And I have always kind of maintained the bond, the human. Number one, it implies reciprocity. Number two, it is so much, it's very species specific.
yes.
Canines,
Yes.
intense ability to bond. Rabbits, not so much.
Mhm.
On a different level. And then in many visitation programs or in many therapeutic sessions, it's almost we're creating a pseudo bond for the client, because that animal is not truly bonded with that client.
Right.
The animal is participating, doing behavior and so forth. And that's why in recent years, the bond has been less and less useful for me just to describe our work. But it's not irrelevant because it exists, and it can even exist with the rabbit over the horse. But it's so very.
Right. No, exactly right. Like, just because I am super interested in your peacocks or your, the pigs, like I love them. I think they're amazing. And I'm like, oh, I get
Right.
excited to see them, but we're not bonded, right? I don't have a bond with them because, all of the, I guess, qualifiers of a bond, that I use a lot in the stuff that I do, like the same qualities that make up a bond between human and human are very, to me, are identical, right? Like the distress when you're apart, and the excitement to see each other, and the whatever, your proximity, your emotions, all the stuff.
Safety. Yep.
Yeah. Those
Mhm.
don't apply if, the dog comes through and says hi to you. Like, maybe in a visit, the dog could care less about you. Maybe the dog's tired. You're the 8th person that he's seen that day. And he's like, but he walks by, you're not bonded. They're not bonded with you or
Right.
with them.
Right.
But people will say that.
Right.
I look at it like in my therapy. It's like, yes, my dog will, have the same client coming every single week for months or, years or
Mhm.
whatever. They will create a differential bond with different clients. Actually, so will it with my rats. My rats do differentiate between, but the hamsters, believe me, there's no real bond. It's an interaction, but it's not a bond. I, of course, because it's psychotherapy, I let them project and they can say anything they want to. Of course, I believe every word, but I know the difference, and that even can be evaluative for me.
Mhm.
So, but you have to recognize the difference.
Yes.
I have a
But-
question.
Yes.
So what is the word for the attraction that we feel to an animal, right? I see you on the street with your dog and I have to stop and see your dog. Now, we don't bond maybe, but
Right.
what is it that attracts humans to animals, and some animals back to the human?
Biophilia hypothesis.
Biophilia.
That's what they
Okay.
go with.
Yeah.
Which is a word we would never use in what I do as a volunteer, right? There's something there that when I walk my dog through the hospital, 90% of the people I see are gonna say something or want to stop, right, and see the dog.
And so do I.
So that, right, so
So
that's
yeah, so
different,
do I.
that's different than the bond, right? The bond is
Yeah.
built
Right.
over time.
It's
So
just a desire
there's
for
other
it.
Over
degree-
time and after repeated interactions.
Right.
A bond may occur, a reciprocal bond.
Right, so my dog could build a bond with someone who she sees all the time, even though she doesn't go home and live with them.
Right.
But it's not gonna happen on that first visit unless it's a really intense visit or there's something unique about that visit.
Mhm.
But Laura, that is such a deep, deep question you ask, because there's other elements in it, you know, that whole idea of neoteny and, you know, that we infantilize dogs and puppies and we spawn to them, and especially breeds with round heads and gloopsy eyes and, you know, even cats and felines have adapted over generations to our need and our responses, you know, so I mean, that's such a deep, deep area.
Mhm.
It's deep, and I'll give you just one more deeper thing, not, you know, in the constraints of this, but you know, I don't have children. I don't see babies and have that feeling that some people see. You know, some people see babies and they have that feeling, right? They have to touch and they have to. I don't have that, but I see a puppy, I see a horse, whatever it is, and I have that feeling.
Mhm. Mhm. Right.
Yeah.
There's just something, right, with most of us with animals, especially if you're
Just-
like puppies.
Just to come down from these wonderful heights of theoretical discussion, would it be sort of practical to say that the human animal bond and human animal interactions are mechanisms by which a lot of this work is probably happening? However, that's what we're not going into, because we don't want to get entangled into any discussion of mechanisms or underlying
Yeah.
processes that
This is not our,
justify this work. We want to describe the practices as they are right now, because there are many of them anyway. So would that be an easy way to not have to go so deep into what's the difference between bonding? And because if we go into, well, does the client bond with the therapy dog in a therapy practice session? In a terminology paper?
Well, we had kind of identified some of, for example, some of the theories that support the benefits of the human-animal interactions and the human-animal bond. And we're going to include things like biophilia and so on, and attachment. So I think including some of that, the theories or the criteria or characteristics of each is important in kind of in describing the separation and how they are different, but how they both have a role in animal-assisted services.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
we have no way to talk about bond and interaction without talk about some theories and some differences between them.
Mhm, mhm.
Yep, that's a good point. Does that help you, Laura and Mariana?
I think so. Yeah,
Yes.
Mariana? It
Yeah,
sounds
yes.
like- Yeah, okay,
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah, thanks, yeah.
So any other thoughts?
I just feeling about the idea of bond versus interactions in the services. I wonder how much the bond, I mean, again, I'm just, associating. I told you I was associative.
Mhm.
The bond may not necessarily be important, but rather it's the interactions.
Mhm.
Especially when it seems that for a bond to really occur, that it is after, repeated interactions between individuals who have become familiar with one another. And so often there are interactions without the bond. And I think, like Amy said, I'm the one that I see the peacock or I see the kitten, and Laura said too, I see the dog, and I mean, my heart is there. I'm connecting, but is there that reciprocity?
Yeah.
And that reciprocity has to exist in order to be considered a mutual bond.
The one thing that I see with the bond that may be relevant to somehow mention is it's a spectrum. It's a range of bond.
Mhm.
Interactions are more clear. Anything is an interaction, whether you see the peacock, whether you pet the
Right.
peacock, whatever.
Right.
And that there's a potential for a bond, but it's species dependent. It is situational. It
Yes.
requires longer time commit, that kind of thing. So
Mhm.
Well
maybe
said.
just describe a little bit.
Yeah, okay. I think that's pretty much where we're going.
Yeah.
Right, Mariana? So yeah, thank you, Michael. And
So that might add, help Mariana, because I was trying to think, well, where would we put this? But, Mariana could, say, although, these are, relevant to think about, that's not what we're defining, or something like that.
Right,
Mhm, mhm.
exactly.
Right,
Yeah.
right. We're describing.
Yeah.
That's it, just describe.
We're acknowledging, which is
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
Right, because people do use HAI and AAI interchangeably, right? So that's why it's important to bring
Right.
up, because they're really not synonymous, but they can be in certain situations. But
Right.
that's for another paper. But that's kind of why we need to bring it up in this paper, but we don't want to go
Mhm.
into great detail.
Right. Okay. I think we're good.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Mm-hmm. So are you comfortable, or does anybody feel comfortable making any comments to the paper, like writing pieces based on what we've talked about? Anyone want to take a section? Anyone want to do editing? With what involvement would you like to have or not have?
I was thinking, if you think that the table would be useful, maybe we could decide which of the columns should remain, and also if someone could answer some of the questions, because a lot of the rubrics in my table were questions for you guys who are working in the field. I'm a researcher. I'm evaluating what you do, more or less, and looking at whether it makes a difference for people or not. And I was wondering if anyone is willing to help out with correcting things like that. And I would think that the table like that would fit after the narrative of the definition, saying, we think that these are summarize the main domains and subdomains of these services. And we think that in order to understand the content of these practices, one should look at goals, and whatever we decide might be interesting to retain. And here's our table summarizing our current, information about these for each of the subdomains. So at this point, other than the first column that is basically translating the graphic that we all worked on, and Amy's last basically graphic, everything else at the right of that column has question marks in it. So I'm happy to work on it, but I need corrections and other people to look at it as well.
Yep. Yeah, we'll be happy to.
I'm sort of waiting to see that, what other people choose, and then I will jump in and try to fill in what, no one really wants to do, but I'd be, happy to work, let's say, on the.
My dog's not quiet.
I know, I kind of see for you, Nancy, if you're okay with it, because you do such a nice job of like really tightening everything up, like, because your papers are so detailed and you do get into that, like doing the full review and then, whatever gaps, highlighting whatever gaps are still there. So rather than you doing a section, Nancy, I kind of was hoping you would look at it in its entirety.
I'd love to, it'd be a lot easier. But, I can also write, some, like the therapy section, a section I would, love to do.
Okay, great.
And then, go ahead and edit some of the other stuff.
Yeah, whatever you want to do at this point. Like I said, there's no like specific ownership. Like if you want to take a section, do it. If not, you're like, I just want to read through it and I want to highlight things, do that too. It needs more eyes on it. That's what's true about
I
it.
think,
Like,
anything will, do the writing and then, get the feedback.
yeah. Right. Yeah. It doesn't have to be perfect at this point. This is just like, let's just get the information in and then we can go back through, or
Right.
Nancy can go back through and tighten it all to make sure that it flows and,
Yeah.
What do you want,
So-
sweetie? What?
All right.
You need to go
So I
outside?
guess that's all I have. Does anybody, do you feel okay, comfortable? Like if we just give it a couple weeks, what I say, August, sometime in August 5th, does that give us enough time to review it, or do we need more time than that?
Deadlines are important.
Mhm.
I know, look, when I wrote that section that I've been thinking about writing for a couple of weeks now, it's like, oh no, we're meeting tomorrow. I better do something about it. I think it's
Yep,
really
deadlines
a
matter.
Deadline.
Mhm.
Would someone, like one person or two, would want over Zoom to go over the table with me and correct some of the stuff? And would anyone volunteer
I
to
can
do
do
that?
I can do that.
Nancy, that would be fantastic, because I have some questions,
Mhm.
especially about nursing, AT and nursing and things like that, that I
Yeah,
still
I
don't
was
understand
wondering
how it's
about,
different.
Again, it's a certain problem. I've had it and I think I felt better with it last time. And then all of a sudden I looked at it
Yeah,
a couple days ago. Life skills in both the therapy and in the
Right.
education. And I keep thinking, but that's psychoeducation.
Yeah.
right.
it-
So, yeah.
Yeah.
But I also, somebody about the AT in nursing, I still don't understand how it's different from visitation and hospitals and things like that. Maybe it is different, but I
Only in
would
certain
need someone to.
subspecialties. It's like general nursing. 'Cause I know
Exactly, that's what I was thinking. But
yeah,
somebody was over email, had a big comment about that.
She's a
and
nurse.
Again,
She does,
she's a nurse practitioner, so her work is different, and you have a hospice, like it's common in hospice. So like,
right,
what is the specific goal? And it goes back to what we've said from day one. What's in your,
right.
who's
Right.
delivering it? What is the, what are your outcomes? So I think
Exactly.
really addressing that in the paper, that's what drove our definition, I think is really important.
Okay, well, I would love to maybe just meet with Nancy or with someone who's a practitioner and just go over what should stay and what should not in sort of a table form that kind of puts together a lot of the information.
Yeah, it's a great table.
So,
I'm thinking all of a sudden the idea came up because I remember that email with somebody, a nurse, who say, no, but I do a certain type of therapy. I don't know who that person is, but I do have a friend who's a psychiatric nurse.
Mhm.
mhm.
Maybe I can call her and ask her what she thinks of that.
But
Yeah.
then why wouldn't that be just psychotherapy? I mean, why
Yeah,
would
it could
have
be
to
that. I think that's the
Right.
question,
Right,
Who's delivering the service?
exactly. We
Mhm.
want to include everybody, but at the same time, if we
Differentiate.
differentiate too much, again, the scientists come and say, this is all bullshit. Sorry, I don't understand what this is. Everybody who takes a dog somewhere declares themselves.
Right.
So we don't want to get to that point, because I've encountered that in my own scientific
Agreed.
career. So
Yeah. Agreed. Yep. All right. So then,
Oh,
Oh, go ahead.
I do have a question, Amy. It kind of goes back to what you were saying before about that you are going to be going to kind of are meeting with these other organizational members to let them know where this goes. So I'm going to be teaching another class on animal assisted services in fall, and I'm trying to decide, should I start using
I wouldn't
animal
yet. I wouldn't
assisted
yet. Because
services versus
yeah, I wouldn't
AI?
yet.
What do you,
It should wait.
where do we go?
Yeah, I think we need to wait on that because I'm in the same boat,
Okay.
right? I have a class in the fall and
Yeah.
I've been doing the same thing. And I don't have a problem saying that there is, a shift in terminology. And
That's exactly it.
That's coming.
Yeah,
That's
so we're in the
okay.
middle of a process. It's a process.
Okay.
process.
Yes.
What do you think about introducing the idea that, animal assisted therapy, for example, may become or may be called in the near future, may be called animal assisted treatment. AAI may be called animal assisted services. I mean, are you going to even mention those kinds of things in, like, say, a fall semester?
Michael, I can see that you're ready.
Yeah, I am, and I'm just gonna introduce the idea of what Miyako and I have done at Green Chimneys. The moment we started to feel the shift in ourselves, that it made more sense to call it animal assisted, animal service, or whatever, nature-based, we started to use the terminology. And of course, we're not a university, we're not a curriculum as such. So, I can't speak for that, but I think language like this is going to become more accepted as soon as it starts being used. And the more people use it, the easier it will be to get adopted.
True. Yeah, that's true. And I think that that's our ultimate goal. If Aubrey's next book says, animal assisted services, that would be really great, right? If we get that kind of buy-in, which we're hoping to. But my thought is, like, if we start saying, like, and I love ours, I think ours it's very transparent. I'm 100% on board. But then I'm like, well, what if somebody comes up with a word that we're like, oh yeah, and then we've been telling people this, but it isn't. So I think it works in your case, Michael. It totally works, right? And in my nonprofit, it works too. I can say that, I'm doing animal assisted services, or I'm doing animal assisted support services. It fits what I do. But my hesitation is from an educational standpoint.
Right.
I would be careful what I put out. Just hopefully we'll be ready in the fall, and then we can say that. So
when I give my courses, I talk about this, and I decided to reduce the chapter in which I speak about animal assisted therapy and all the activities, interventions, to reduce it to one page, which says, you can find this on iOhio, you can find this on that page, because it's developing so rapidly that I cannot put it on paper and leave it with you. So check it out for yourself on the internet and see what's the terminology of today. And I tell them that it's changing every time, and that it changes from interventions to services. That's one thing. The second thing is that I'm working on a paper now on the welfare of animals and animal assisted interventions.
Oh, yay.
And I'm wondering if I should change the word interventions into services already. So
you can, that's an easy fix at the end, but like, it would be great to start to do that in writing.
I want to deliver the paper in September, so
okay.
It is a time changing word. So if I choose for the word intervention, I will be old fashioned. If I choose for the word services, I will be the first, or one of the first, to use that term internationally in papers. So it's,
then you have to, I think it's kind of hoping that that's gonna be accepted across the
Exactly.
globe.
Yeah.
And I mean, my first session is on terminology, helping people understand the difference between therapy animals and service animals, animal-assisted interventions and, or animal-assisted therapy and animal-assisted education. So, yeah, all right.
I think that's where you talk about the importance of like why words are important and why we don't just interchange words and say pet therapy and we say
Right.
why we need to have it. And there is a shift, and the need for transparency and the need for like all the things that Daniela has been saying all along, like this, in order to be considered a rigorous field and a empirical field, we have to be transparent in what we're doing and make sure that everybody's saying exactly what they're doing.
Exactly. There's got to be consistency. So which way do we go in September?
Right. So I'm meeting with Ohio and AAI next Friday. So
Okay.
I might have a little better answer for you then.
Okay. I'm going to follow up with the group next time we
definitely.
meet then, because I mean,
I'll make a note.
kind of putting it out there, and I'm developing my my presentations and videos, and not sure, which way to go. So. Okay.
All right, I'll make a note I'll ask, and then I'll make a note to follow up with you guys. Sorry, Michael.
That'd be great.
No, it's just don't forget, language is changing around us. I recently had a session where substance use issues were discussed, and of course that's different from substance abuse. And substance abuse was the traditional word, and it has I actually asked the practitioner or the therapist in the field, when did this change? How did it change, and who changed it? And so they gave me that story. And then it also brings up the whole gender language shift that we're going through right now, the he, she, they, the pronouns. And, I really feel we're kind of like in that sort of a situation. And I absolutely understand waiting as long as we can, but it's at some point when we have some security, start using it, and being that first author who publishes a paper with this new term, that's going to be the brave person rather than the person who just clings to some of the old language.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it'll be important too, because whoever's reviewing the paper would need to be aware of this too, right? So if you have a reviewer who's very like, oh, we don't use this, we use it, then they're going to go through and correct it or reject the paper because it's not using the right terminology without, the awareness of what's coming, or at least we hope.
Which is why it's good to put it up front. This is what we changed from what is in the literature. But I do have one very, very final question, sort of again for my own understanding. So I have a rubric now naming organizations that are providing credentials for both people and animal to do any kind of animal assisted work. I don't specify which and so on. Is there any kind of official, I don't know, certification of these organizations, or anyone could call themselves, look, these are our standards, we provide you with certificates, you're an animal handler that is ready to work with a therapist? Is there something out there in the field that everybody recognizes as a legitimate way of getting credentials? I know in Israel there's a lot, and there's a whole academic program.
Yeah, but that's
for
specifically
therapy,
for psychotherapy.
for psychotherapy itself, but I don't know if there's that level of.
No, in other places, I know there's ISAT, which they talk about therapy, but it's general interventions or services, and it's very different. They ask for like 250 hours, and then we ask for 100. It's hard to go because different countries are going to be with different possibilities, and we say 1,100 hours, but that includes learning to be a psychotherapist. Where ISAT may say you already have to be a psychotherapist. You need this many hours. It's complicated depending on.
So what Pet Partners is doing right now, having their sort of, I don't know if they call it certification for the visitation teams and then for the professionals. Is that something that's already established, or is that?
Brand new. The professional one's brand new. Just but similar timing as AAI. Like they had the standards for the support programs, but now they've moved into the and I think they just launched it. I want to say maybe Laura knows, like January. It was
I think so, or I think earlier together, Laura. go
Is,
ahead.
is,
It was actually, I think it was actually April when it, or May when it was officially launched.
yeah.
so is this the
I mean, it
same
just
process
became-
that AAII is advertising? No, different. It's just-
Danielle, I don't know if I'm fully understanding your question, but that is one of the challenges. You know, in the horse world, you have Path International in the
Right.
United States.
And
Certific-
EGALA.
You have EGALA having certifications, and
Right,
Risa Van Fleet, who is a wonderful practitioner.
right.
She
for
has
play therapy.
the
Yeah,
certification and courses that she teaches, and you can multiply that by so many different
Yeah.
professions.
For the horses, you don't have as any certification for the horses.
well,
You
so
do.
that's a sticky point for
The American-
legitimacy. You know, that's the sticky point when it comes to, well, this practice is a legitimate practice, because if there's no sort of official recognition, like an academic graduate program that gives you, you know, degree, then it's going to be hard to. That's what I was hoping to be able to put in that table. These are the organizations that we all trust and know, and people who go through these kind of programs are real trained professionals working with animals in whatever field they are.
The only danger there that I see is that how do you separate the credible ones from the ones that may not be credible or that even be questionable? And
Right.
you know, you can certainly start with the largest groups, but you know, how do you decide that?
Yep. That is always the hardest part, because like, even like when I would write certain things and I would say, use, you know, go through a reputable, and they're like, how do you know what's reputable? What's added, what's appropriate? Yeah, there isn't that. So, you know, you just have to, you know, sometimes people love Path, sometimes they love EGALA. They read it and see where they align, and that's where they go. But, you know, it's really difficult, you know, and people calling themselves, like, I do certification, but there's no, you know, third party evaluation, right? So if I'm saying I'm going to certify you and I'm giving you my own exam, it's not a certification, right? You have to have that objective third party person who's doing the.
Well, for instance, when we started my association, they had a number of animal assisted therapy programs. Okay, some of them included that you could have a high school education and take a course, you know, 1 day a week course for 2 years, and you're a therapist. Other programs were 500 hours, some were 800 hours, some required high school education, some required a BA, and had specific coursework that were prerequisites. So what we did is that we started our association. We, you know, listed, in order to be a member of the professional association, you need A, B, C, D, E. And then all of a sudden, all these programs lifted their coursework, and they started demanding more coursework, more field hours, more supervision. So, I mean, that was the way we did it here in Israel, because it was a real mess. And of course, some places were not in academic institutions, and so there was no oversight in the quality of the coursework of the people teaching. It was a real mess, and so that's how we did it here. But, you know, go and do it internationally, go and do it for all the states. And, you know, and even Risa, who's amazing, and I love her writing and the stuff that she's done. but she only credentials people who've been through her program. So if somebody, I had a discussion with her, am I allowed to call myself an animal assisted play therapist? With all my, and it says, well, you can, but it's like you have to go through her program in order to get the certification. But what if people have they've been through play therapy programs and they've been this and that, and there's a question. There's so many questions of how do you do it?
Amy, you hit on something that is very important. PATH International, 2 years ago, just before COVID, transitioned their certification process out of house. So they no longer are doing both the education and the evaluation. American Hippotherapy Association has done that too with their credentialing. And I think that's probably something that needs to happen more with the dog work and with the small animal work too.
Yeah, for sure.
Is that what Nina was running? That I remember she was running trying to change things around. I wish Nina was part of this group. She could give us some insight. Michael, is that what you referred to what Nina was working on a couple of years ago?
So much, no.
Okay.
This
That's
is a
something else.
process Hippotherapy Association did quite a few years ago, and PATH just recently did, because of this perception that you cannot be the education body and then also be the certifier of you. Yeah, so it's a credentialing council that now does the actual certifying and testing.
So that's basically what we did. Was a separate association that's not part of any program. Matter of fact, although it was some of the directors of some of the programs were starting it, as soon as they could, they left the central committee, so it would not be identified with any specific program.
Interesting. So good talk.
Oh, Laura, I sent you something in the chat so that we could hook up. So if you can look at your chat.
Thank you.
Right, and are we still okay? I threw out, I think it was the August 5th deadline. Does that give everybody enough time to go through the paper and just put your comments in? Just, I like this, I don't like this. You can comment, you can add paragraphs. It's your document too, so anything that you add would be fabulous.
So
People can sign up like you asked.
what paper specifically are you talking about that you want people to review by August 5th?
Yeah,
Which
it's the one
document specifically?
I sent in that last email that
Yep.
I sent, there it says here's a link to the paper, like that's the paper.
Okay.
So that would just get you there quickly, easily, so everyone's on the same.
And if
same
people could
document.
sign up for different sections and then, do that quickly, maybe even say in the email, I just signed up for this, so that you don't get the same person signing up for two sections, and then it'll get a little bit confusing. That would be good.
So here's a link to the rough outline of the white paper. That's what you're referring to? Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. That's what I thought. It just wasn't.
No, it's a good
Sure.
question.
Okay.
Valid question.
Oh, there's
Right.
quite a lot in there, actually.
Yeah,
Cool.
Yeah.
Amy
so-
did amazing on that.
Well, it wasn't just-
I
it
was
wasn't-
seeing what Nancy did, and I thought that was what you were
Oh,
talking
No,
about.
just like
but-
one little section I took. I said, I gotta do it.
Okay.
Deadline, meeting. It's gonna happen. I gotta write something.
She did it. I mean,
Okay.
whatever. I had an advantage because we already had put together pieces of that document, so wasn't me solely, but
Okay.
but it's in there because a lot of it still was relevant. Some of it might not be. So if there's things in there that are like, yeah, this doesn't fit what we're talking about, we'll just remove it. So, well,
So if you want people to look at this and suggest edits or whatever, I know I've worked with groups with you before where we would have our own colored text we would use, or
Yep.
should we
Yep.
insert it as a comment outside of the document? Would that be, or
if you just want to do it in a different color, that
what
would
do
be,
you, okay.
yeah, it just makes it easy because then I can see, because if you're adding a whole paragraph, it's the
Right.
comments are nice when it's one thing, but if
Right.
you're writing like a paragraph, a few sentences, put it in a different color, and then that
Got
way
it.
we can see it right away, like, okay, Laura added a whole bunch, oh, Mariana added all this, so we can just
Okay.
see who
All
wrote
right.
what. So,
Sounds good.
all right, well, I guess we can wish everyone a happy Friday or Saturday.
I try to get
depending
hold
where you
of,
live.
I try to get hold of Meg, and it was strange because, you know, she always answers and she didn't answer. And then I sent her a WhatsApp message and her phone was off. And then I'm, you know, because I spent 5 days with her in Australia at a workshop. I know her husband, and I sent something to her husband, who is a big WhatsApp, and both of them, I hope they're okay.
Yeah.
Because as of right now, their phones are still closed, and it should be in the middle of the morning there, so.
Oh, yeah,
I
yeah.
I remember she told that she's going to have an intervention, a medical intervention.
Oh, okay.
Maybe that's it. Maybe they're running a workshop and so their cell phones
Oh.
are closed.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thanks everyone, and have a great weekend. And we'll, oh, do we want to meet again, or do we want to just work on the document and then?
Deadline. If we meet again,
Mhm.
Can we set up a meeting for like a week after we're supposed to review the document by, or something like that?
Mhm. And then get everyone's like vote that this is what we're going to submit to IHIO and AAII.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Like how about actually by the 5th, if you want our input completed by then, is there,
Yeah.
or is that too close together?
I know. Does August 5th work for everyone?
That's a Friday again?
If that works for everyone.
That's a Friday?
Mhm.
Okay,
Right.
yeah.
It shouldn't take long, because we're just gonna say like, yes, we like it, no, we don't, right? So, well.
We never say it that quick.
No. Right, we don't, but okay. Oh, here you go. Say hi. You saying hi? All right, so we'll just plan on August 5th, and if you cannot make it then, just send us your comments, your notes, whatever, and we'll see you then.
Okay, good seeing everybody.
Yep, good to see you.
Bye, have a
Bye-bye.
good weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Laura?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
what,
Yeah.
which
Oh,
one is your
Don't close the
email?
meeting yet. Hold on. Yeah, let me write.
Okay, before I close it.
Wait. Okay. Too many things going on here. Let me